Hello and welcome to another episode of Next Week in Gaming. Next week is September week 4, and as usual we'll be covering releases, early access releases, interviews, game deals, bundles and all that kind of stuff. So first up we have a very large Humble Bundle which is by Creative Assembly, and this is the Total War Weekly Bundle. This one's on for 2 weeks and it'll finish on Tuesday the 29th. The first tier is the Pay What You Want tier, which is just about anything minimum of $1, and of course it includes Medieval 2, Viking Battle for Asgard, and of course beta access to their weird janky little MOBA arena type game, Total War Arena. And to be honest, I don't think anyone's really fussed about that. The second tier includes the original Medieval. It also has the Empire Total War Collection, as well as a 66% off coupon for Total War Attila. And the final tier includes Rome 2 and many DLCs, which is actually pretty good if you ask me. It runs a bit crappy on low-powered processors if you're looking for maximum graphics. And there's a final tier for a t-shirt, except the t-shirt, to be honest, is a little bit bland. Overall, there are some pretty great games, and the first tier is definitely worth getting. But of course, this is going on for 2 weeks, so next Tuesday you'll see a couple more games added to it. So the first release for this week is today, Saturday the 19th of September, and this is one being made by a company called Duct Tape Games. This isn't a AAA release, it's a very sort of small budget indie type game, and it's called Broadside. Now, we did a review on Raven's Cry, and the ship combat was potentially fun but done badly, and people just generally like fighting pirate ships against each other and firing cannons. It's cool, it's a good mechanic, and this game is all about that. It's not multiplayer, it's just single player, so it'll be either a campaign orientated or just sort of play when you want skirmish type game. You'll be roaming the high seas, battling other pirate ships, shooting them with your broadside cannons, and then once you've whittled down their pirate ship, you'll then go into an isometric view on top of the enemy ship, and you'll be fighting their crew and eventually destroying their captain and taking over the ship, and rinse and repeat from there. Details are relatively light. I imagine it's going to be quite a cheap game, possibly a short game. The water looks surprisingly good. We'll just have to wait and see whether this is a typical indie cash grab or just one of those nice neat little gems that appears on Steam every so often. So the next release is coming out on Tuesday the 22nd of September, and it's by the indie studio Frictional Games, and it's a game called Soma. This is like their Amnesia series of games, only it's a slightly different setting, in that you're underwater, and instead of zombies and crazy monsters, the enemies are weird robots that are currently going through some weird existential crisis. If you saw any of the YouTube videos, they did some pretty great live action trailers and audio logs of like them messing around with machines, and this machine that thought it was a human being and didn't realise that it was in pieces and had basically torn itself to pieces. Early gameplay shows it's absolutely terrifying. I would genuinely love to play it, but I don't think with my history with horror games I could possibly bring myself to do it, although we might cover it in a review at some point, which should be an interesting experience. Probably not. Another game releasing on Steam's Early Access next week on Tuesday the 22nd of September is SubArea. This is by Studios Illogica. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. And this is a game that, bizarrely, when I first looked at it, I thought Micro Machines. Don't know why. It has absolutely nothing to do with it. Although in this game the world is completely patrolled and policed by robots, and you're like a rebel person that just so happens to have a floating drone, which is a robot, but you don't seem to have too much of a care whether that is going to kill you or not. So the general gameplay of this is that you don't kill anyone, you don't have any weapons or anything like that. Instead you have to use your little drone to force the robots to kill each other, and this is going to involve varying types of drones and solving all the puzzles in order to progress. It's a progressive maze world, so each time you play it's going to be slightly different because it's a roguelike game, so you'll have to think on your feet and solve the puzzles as you go along. You will, of course, be able to play 4 different characters, which will all have their own little unique abilities with this little drone. And, of course, all throughout the game, you'll be able to upgrade those abilities for the drone. So it looks really quite cool. I was quite surprised that such a... I don't know, it kind of felt a little bit unique, but at the same time, it's fitting into a genre where there's a lot of games that are very similar. But hopefully this one will be a relatively interesting game. Our next release is a game called Skyworld by Wolfdog Interactive, and we're not sure when this one's coming out, although if Steam's upcoming games is to be believed, it should be sometime soon. If this game isn't, inspired by Terry Pratchett's Discworld novels, then I don't know where he's got the idea from, because it just, as soon as I saw it, I was like, that's definitely Discworld. In this game, it's like a very casual turn-based strategy, but very pretty, I have to say. I'm loving that art style. You'll be taking control of your own little kingdom, this dragon empire. Quite a small little area, and the world's been broken up into these tiny little shards, which you'll have to create your empire and build onto it. They've got these little mountainous regions in the middle with the dragon sat on it. You'll obviously be building a couple of armies, making yourself a nice economy and conquering other enemies and telling the dragons to go and aggressively negotiate other enemies' territory. It looks relatively cool. They're saying that it's going to be designed for people who may want to go for very short, small, bite-sized playthroughs, which is probably why the world is split up into separate pieces, so you can sort of take on one sky shard at once and just play for half an hour, maybe an hour, and then leave and not feel like you're pressured into playing more of the game. But of course, for those who are looking into massively long, week-long play games, like we used to play Heroes for entire weeks at a time, the availability is there. It looks great, and the concept seems very simple, so hopefully it will hold people's attention for long enough. So our review for next week will be Cross of the Dutchman by Triangle Studios. That will be posted on Thursday the 24th of September. I've been looking forward to reviewing this for quite some time, but these past 2 weeks have been relatively busy in terms of AAA releases. But we have finally got ourselves a key a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to be doing that next week. I'm basically having a very specific set of hopes for this game. I'm not really looking for yet another Diablo clone or Path of Exile or Torchlight or all of those sorts of things, and yet at the same time I'm sort of looking and hoping that this game sits somewhere in between Bastion and maybe Torchlight 1, where it was a very nice mix of sort of story and gameplay. When I looked at the trailers, there was small amounts of loot drops. I'm not really looking for a game that's obsessive about loot, because there are so many games out there that are so good it would struggle to compete. So what I'm hoping is this is a really, really good story driven game, and by the looks of it, it is. I mean, the developers have spent an awful lot of time focusing on the story aspect of the game, and that is, you know, the core reason that makes it different. So hopefully we'll be able to lop a few Saxons' heads off with a wonderful narration of some, you know, some quality original story that no one's ever seen before. That's it from us at NextPowerUp. Join us next week for our next Week in Gaming episode, and of course on Thursday for our weekly review. Just a quick mention that we posted an article earlier this week about a new game studio called Upstream Arcade, which has just opened, and they're working on their first game, and you can follow those guys at upstream_arcade on Twitter, so be sure to follow those guys for updates and just general information about their new game, which is rather exciting. As always, leave your comments in the section below for what you guys have been playing. It's been another long week of reviews and Warframe for me, although mostly reviews because they just take so much time. And we'll see you guys next time.